Welcome, everyone, to the Town of Richmond Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. So we have Allison, Ian, Mark, and myself as members of the Planning Commission, Keith as our planner, and we have one guest, Christy Witters. So welcome, everybody. We will start out by just reviewing the agenda and make sure that's what everybody wants and is here to talk about. We have two items. One is going to be looking at the changes that we made based on the select board's needs. The village residential neighborhoods, zoning districts, those new districts. And the second item for the second hour is looking at the flood hazard overlay district with changes based on the public hearing about that district. So are there any comments about this agenda? Anyone want to change things, add things? We have a few updates and other business at the end. So, hello. Looks okay. All right, so we'll continue with the posted agenda then. I don't see any hands or hear any negative comments. And public comment on non-agenda items. Christy, do you have any comment on non-agenda?
Yeah, I was just going to say on non-agenda items. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Mark.
Hi, Mark. Yes.
Hey,
you have a comment?
I just wanted to say that was a nice front porch forum posting that you did for recruitment. It was a good take. It sort of, came in through the back door to Planning Commission available posts. Thought it was well done. We need more of those.
Thanks. Yeah, we hope that it generates some response. I have had one respondent who is interested in talking more about it, so that's good, at least. Be nice to fill out our 2 vacant slots. All right.
Wise.
There. Okay, so next we're going to go to review the minutes of the 10/16 meeting, our October 16th meeting. Any comments, additions, corrections to those meetings? Speak up or raise your hand. Looks like everybody's okay with that. So we will accept those minutes into the record as they were written. Okay, and we'll move right along to item number 5 on our agenda. Review revisions to the village residential neighborhoods north and south zoning districts as requested by the select board at their meeting of October 7th, 2024.
Pull those up.
So what they recommended at their public hearing, and the only thing that was talked about at their public hearing, was that the Planning Commission align our requirements with the new statutory requirements, which went into effect actually on June 17th, 2024. So that is what we have done. And then there was one other thing that we've done that we will talk about after we talk about this. So in the legislative summary on community planning, which outlines the changes that towns must make to their bylaws to conform with Act 181, it says that duplexes basically must be allowed wherever single family dwellings are allowed. And it clarifies, if you wish to call it that, or changes it to say that municipalities cannot require any additional land for the extra unit. So in other words, the density cannot be relevant here. The duplex can be anywhere a single family home can be as a permitted use, And also 3 to 4 unit buildings also are required to be permitted uses, and they can be in a water and sewer district. They can be on the same size lot as a single family dwelling. So this is what's in the statute now. This is what the zoning department in all the municipalities will have to administrate, no matter what it says in our regulations. So we felt that we might as well put it in our regulations. So
We have to allow 4-unit apartment buildings on quarter-acre lots or fifth of an acre lots.
lots. Exactly. So another
We
thing
have
that
to allow,
another thing that Act 47 required was that you had to have regulations that allowed for 5 dwelling units per acre, which requires a minimum lot size of 0.2 acres. So that means on a 0.2 acre lot, you could have a 3 to 4 unit building or a duplex or a single family home and an ADU.
so if it says we have to allow 5 units on
5 units per acre,
reflect a fifth of an acre, which would be 4 units on on 0.8 acres, right?
a 4 unit building has to be allowed wherever you can allow a single family home. So
Right.
for a
And it
density
says
of
that we have to allow 4 units per, 5 units per acre. But
Yeah.
that means that we could require 4 unit buildings to be on 0.8 acres. And then a fifth lot of a single family home on 0.2 acres.
Well, what this is saying is that on a 0.2 acre lot, a fifth of an acre, where you could have a single family home, you are also allowed to have a 3 to 4 unit multifamily building instead of that single family home.
In the same district, but I don't know if it's really saying that that all 4 units should be allowed on 0.2 acres, because then you're telling me that we can allow, that we are mandated by the state to allow 20 units per acre.
That is what it is saying. That is correct, Mark. That is what it is saying. Which, is a little bit. Yeah, right. That's what it, and also well, anyway, Christy has a comment.
Yeah,
Christy, go ahead.
This is Christy Witters, and that's exactly why I'm here tonight, because the statute says 5 units per acre, but this statute was written 2 years ago in the first biennium of the legislative session, and then edited in the second. And it's always complicated when you take an existing document and you edit words and without a comprehensive review. So what's happened in this statute is that the language is not consistent. And so Mark pointed out that the statute says 5 units per acre, but then the edit changed it to allow 3 to 4 unit buildings on any lot that a single family house was on, which equals 20 units per acre. And I do appreciate the legislature's intent to increase housing, and especially in more densely developed areas, in water and sewer areas. I totally appreciate that they're trying to do the right thing, but I think that this editing is going to cause some unintended consequences. And I would really like to get some clarification as to whether or not the intent is really 20 units per acre. And if that is what they intend, then let's write that in there instead of the 5 units per acre. Let's be clear, because makes me wonder, like, is there a different way for us to zone where we're not even thinking about it? Like, I haven't spent much time thinking about, okay, we had developed like, okay, our lots are 0.2 acres, and okay, so that's an easy first cut, 5 units per acre, each lot's 0.2, and then we get this added on of, oh, 4 units have to be on that same lot. So then we're jumping to 20 units per acre, but that's not what the statute says. So like, is there a different way that we could do this that's not obfuscating the law? Or is that really the legislature's intent? And I think it's significant because I live in the Village Residential Neighborhood North. We are one of the more affordable residential neighborhoods in the village, or in the town. We have some of the smallest lots. We have some of the smallest houses. We have moderate incomes. And those are the most affordable houses. As we look at the housing prices in Richmond, in the hills with multi-acre lots, they're $1 million homes. And the homes that we have in my neighborhood, yes, in the last appraisal have gone up, but they're the middle income homes. And when we start allowing for 4-unit development on these properties, we're really changing the neighborhood into investment properties. And this is something that's happening across the country where normal people can't buy homes because we're competing with the investors. And it's already happened in my neighborhood. And when we're looking at that missing middle, my neighborhood is that middle. We already are 5 units per acre. We have a mix of duplexes, of single family homes, and an apartment building. We have what I thought the legislature intended for other towns as a model. And I still believe that it is. I think it's a very functional neighborhood, and I think it's a good design. And I am really concerned about the changing of the neighborhood to really make it unaffordable for that middle level. And so I would advocate that we go back and talk to the legislative committee to find out their intent. Is this really what they meant in the piecemeal editing of this legislation? Or what else can we do? Because I don't think that putting 4 units on a 0.2 acre lot was really the intent when looking at, maybe they're thinking about bigger lots. I don't know what they were thinking, but I think that there's unintended consequence.
Yes, we also believe that. And the legislature is ambiguous about whether they want density at all. So there's a movement by the legislature and by regional planning to eliminate the density concept. So Act 47 came in sort of in the transitional phase when they were still thinking it's better just not to have any density, just to have no density, to allow you to meet the coverage, the setbacks, maybe go higher so that we can increase even more the density in the water and sewer district. So I'm not sure that it was not intended to allow this. And it's, there's still from Act 47 language about the 5 units per acre, the density number, which was a big step for us. And this goes further towards the concept of not having any density number. And we have talked to Jacob Hemrick at ACCD, who's instrumental in helping that group. I don't know about him personally. And
His department, definitely, yeah.
the ACCD group is instrumental in writing this legislature. And all that they can tell you about the intent is what is now here in this new guidance in Act 181. That's what they can tell you. Now, we may need to go to our representative and talk. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not something that we have control over right now with our zoning ordinance. Because it will have to be administrated like that, the zoning level. So, you know, whether there's going to be a lot of outcry about it from towns that are in completely different circumstances from the bigger cities, or, you know, who don't like these unintended consequences. There may be, and we may be needing to agitate at that level. So anyway, that's where we are at with it right now. It is the law. So I'm gonna let Ian have a chance to speak.
So are there any avenues to address the concerns that Christie's bringing up other than contacting Jana Brown? Or is that it?
I know, to what end though, at this point? I mean, the legislation has been enacted. I think we'd have to go down the path of re-legislating, so to speak, or adding another correction.
Right, a clarifying connection.
Yeah, I don't know, Ian, to be honest with you.
I mean, one thing that is the case is that in Act 47, they didn't say you have to state, going back to Act 47, which was last year, you have to state 5 units per acre is, and that's, by the way, the minimum that is allowed. So 20 units per acre fits with that because 5 is the minimum. So, but they said that you have to write your rules such that it could happen. And that means, you know, to us, we were thinking about coverage and setbacks. And, you know, if you're going to have 0.2 acre lots, what can you, you know, could you put something like this on a 0.2 acre lot? Could you even put a single family home? Could you put a single family home in an ADU? So we're a tiny bit protected from the 3 to 4 unit buildings on a 0.2 acre lot. Because we still have, you know, 50% coverage, only 50% lot coverage, which is either going to make your 3 to 4 unit building very small,
Small, tiny units, yep.
tiny, or people are going to not do it really. You know what I mean? So even if we have it in our legislature, in our regulations, it's not really going to be possible. And somebody could actually take us to task for that. You know, they could say, you haven't written legislation, you haven't written a regulation that allows this because you only allow 50% lot coverage. And our answer to that is, well, they're going to have to be really small. Then we allow it because we have to, but it's not very practical.
Right. So it's just sort of a de facto governor
So,
on expansion. But it doesn't preclude it.
you know, you've
One
got to
other,
you've got to have parking for 4 cars. If you have a 4 unit building, you have to have parking for 4 cars.
No, because now it's only 1 dwelling unit. Because in the
dwelling unit.
multifamily housing section, a 4 unit building counts as 1 dwelling unit. So I think that's also something that needs to
Yeah,
change.
that's.
And there's just 1 car required, 1 spot.
Yeah.
Fight over it, yeah.
Yeah,
Parking.
it's fun to administer.
I'd have to see exactly
Yes.
how that.
Yeah, no, I don't think 4 units should ever count as 1 unit. I think that does create some unintended consequences probably somewhere.
Yeah, well, we also considered changing it to say that 4 units or less is exempt from density. But that also has some unintended consequences. So it was difficult to figure out exactly how to write this unless you just took exactly the language that was in the statute and put it into your ordinance.
Which is just ambiguous and confusing.
Which is ambiguous, and, you know, it's ridiculous when it says in a water and sewer district, this is true. To write in a water and sewer district regulation, if it's in a water and sewer district, this is true, because you're already writing about the water and sewer district. So,
Yeah. For clarification, as far as the parking goes, we would require 1 per dwelling unit regardless. Except that is what it states, even though they're giving you an exemption for this in 181. you know, where it's treated as a single family dwelling. It's kind of ambiguous there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't like that.
I don't,
The 3 to 4 unit multifamily building should count as one dwelling unit.
yeah, we saw that. I think we looked over it at first and then we got a little bit more clarification come August or so. And we were like,
Right.
what is going on here?
Right.
And then we got confirmation from the state that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what they're talking
But
about.
that is another thing that made us think that they were really heading towards not having density.
Yeah.
They're just saying you have to allow these things. They're not calling it anything, you know, they're not putting it into the density scheme, which was a whole different way of looking at things that is now being kind of superseded.
Is nobody raising red flags about this, like anywhere?
I think at at the regional planning level, I think that there have been some specifically from the smaller towns, not so much from the larger ones. But it really, there really hasn't been a lot of meetings on it, to be honest with you. We've had some PAC meetings, but they've been canceled or moved. I think a lot of the issue was trying to understand exactly what they were trying to say density wise. And I guess that they certainly mandated what needs to be done at this point, Ian. I think this is their intent. I do. So a short answer is yes, there's been some, but it hasn't been a cacophony yet.
Could you
Well, when the
provide
building,
a copy
when the,
of that link?
okay.
Mark, yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand. Could you provide a copy of where it's actually saying that? Because I still keep hearing from what as you read it out, that, okay, 4 unit buildings have to be allowed wherever single family units are allowed. That's
Right.
Sorry. Yes.
In a water and sewer district that
and,
allows it.
and that a duplex has to be allowed anywhere on any lot that allows single family homes. That seems clear. But the caveat about must having allowing 4 units doesn't seem like it's clear that those 4 units have to be on the smallest lot size mandated by the law,
No, it doesn't say that.
right?
No, it's
It says where a single family dwelling is allowed.
wherever a single
So if-
family dwelling is allowed, a
One-
3 to 4 unit building is allowed.
And our neighborhoods say single family dwellings are allowed. So therefore, our neighborhoods have to say that 4 units are allowed.
Right,
But it doesn't say that those 4 units have to go on the same lot size as
yeah,
a single family lot. And that's the part I want to see in writing, because I don't think it doesn't read like that. First of all, it's utterly inane and insane to try and conceive. I lived on a 0.2 acre lot for several years, my first house, and there's no way in hell you could get 4 units on that, practically. And for them to say, oh, the whole town has to be allowing that kind of intensive density, just even with the crazy stuff that goes on down in Montpelier, I can't imagine that is what they're saying we should do.
well, so Mark, in the meeting memo, this is an exact quote from the statute. 3 and 4 unit dwellings must be a permitted use in any residential district that is served by municipal water and sewer on the same size lot as a single family dwelling.
Pretty clear.
That's a direct quote from the
The statute.
statute. Oh. Well, it's still
So-
absolutely insane.
Yeah, well,
Reaching
But
the choir.
We do not
Water and sewer
disagree
on the
with,
same size lot as a single unit dwelling. So really,
Yeah.
they are saying you need to have 20 unit acres.
20 units per
20
acre.
20 units per acre in water and sewer.
If it is subdivided into 0.2 acre lots, because we still have in our regulations that you can only have one single principal dwelling on a lot. So the only way that you would be able to have 20 units on that 1 acre is if you subdivided it into 5.2 acre lots. If you just have a lot that's like 0.4 acres, you can only put one
Principal.
structure,
Yeah.
one principal structure. So you could put 1, 3, and 4 units on 0.4 or 0.3 or 0.5. You could put one of those. So, you know, it seems unlikely that someone who has a 1 acre lot is going to subdivide it into 0.2 acre lots, 5 of them, and put a 3 to 4 unit building on each one, but they could.
Hell, I would, right? Gonna rent property out, why not make it absolutely ridiculous?
Exactly.
Yep.
That's the problem.
Especially
I
with
could make a
cash.
fortune.
sales.
I could make a fortune on my house, but I care about the community,
You'd have to move too.
right? I could move. Oh, sure, fine. If this is what's happening, right? We'll all move and make fortunes. There's so many investors in my neighborhood, right? Like, we'll just sell out. Like, and that's what I don't want to do. I love this town. This is awful.
But you gotta, you have to move to another,
Well, I'll be making
and they're
bank.
expensive as crap, but yeah.
Rent in the
Yeah.
town is twice as much as my mortgage, so I could make bank and move somewhere else.
And you're dealing with investors that are dealing with cash.
Yeah,
That
no,
you
it's
can't, and
ridiculous.
it's the missing middle. It's the, yeah.
Yeah.
it's- No, it's.
No,
And we've got bed and
It's
breakfast
disgusting.
also. I think, Allison, you had something to say.
Yes, am I hooked in?
Yes, you are.
Yeah,
We can-
okay. I'm clicking a lot of buttons here and I'm not sure how it's working. Yes,
We're
y-
good.
you
Push
know,
your butt.
in the past, my memory of how this is basically handled is that these comments or these restrictions are maximum of what you can do in a certain spot, but not a requirement to do that.
Mm.
Right. Yeah, it's not a requirement that you do it. No, it's
No.
just, it's
No,
just that you
Um,
have to allow it if somebody wants to do it. You have to allow it. But it's not
Um,
required that you do it.
well, that's kind of different from what it seems like some of the conversation is going, but I just want to make my historic warning that God has zoned Richmond. We have steep slopes, floodplain, we have the Route 2 and the Winooski River. And we can only do so much down there without making a mess.
Yes.
Well,
I have
there's
nothing
limited.
for that's my feeling is I would like to see the development encouraged in places that would be more favorable to it. That's all.
Yeah. Well, yes. We cannot disagree with this, Allison.
Well, why can't we choose? We live in this town, we pay taxes here. We love this town, we love our neighbors, but why can't we choose?
Because the state of Vermont has decided to meddle in zoning to a greater extent than ever before. And
Conceived.
so
Well, does somebody need to go over and sit in the state house or something?
even that is going to be this, even more of that coming down the line. Act 181 has a huge amount of, like, they want us to put the Act 250 criteria in our zoning, stuff like that. So they're meddling. They're trying to solve the problem of the fact that we don't have enough housing. Ian, go ahead.
Who, do you know, like in Montpelier, I haven't followed this very closely, but like who is behind this initiative? Is it coming from the legislature or is it coming from the governor? Or do
No,
you
I
even
think
know?
maybe the governor vetoed it, didn't he?
I think so.
It was overridden. It's from the legislature. There was a guy called Bongartz who was behind Act 47, but also ACCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Agency of Housing and Community Development, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development,
Yes.
ACCD. Apparently, their lawyers were quite involved in writing this. So, you know, who knows who was really writing it?
Hmm.
So, Christie,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No,
Are you
Ian-
done? Go ahead,
can
Ian.
Well, it just seems like this is something that nobody wants. Or at least not in this form, right? I think
Well,
like
Yes.
most of the people on this commission and even probably some of the people in the neighborhoods are proponents for, you know, more options for housing for people. But it just seems like a misallocation of everything. I don't know, I'm having a really hard time with this.
Well,
Yeah, well,
All of
I
a
mean,
sudden,
the question is, what can we do about it? You know, what can we do about it? That's the question.
I have a comment if I could speak. Where's the,
Go ahead,
Oh, you're good, you're
Allison.
good.
You're speaking.
yeah, okay, here's my comment. I've said it so many times what God's owned Richmond about the floodplain and everything, but we have had so much more flooding, traffic, road destruction, et cetera, in this town in this past 1 year than we've ever had before. And I think that given those things, there's some real restrictions on that. They've had to work really hard. I live up here on the Huntington Road, which is near Hillview Road. And I mean, as you, Virginia, you live up in this area even higher than I do. And it's a mess. We've had I applaud the road crews for all the hard work that they've done and everything. But we don't have the capacity to entertain a whole bunch of more traffic up here. It's just not here. And the state is fine that those people in Montpelier that maybe don't even know where this is can designate a certain thing. But I think we have, as a town, I think we have a right to say, we are having trouble with what's already here. We don't want this. Why can't we do that?
Well, it's a state law that says you have to have it in your zoning. That's what,
No choice.
so it's not
That doesn't
really.
answer my question. Maybe we need to go to the state and say, why'd you make this dumb law?
Yeah, well, Allison, you're on. You're,
Did you volunteer?
Okay,
You volunteer.
I grew up in Montpelier. I'll go storm in there someday. I don't know if
All
it'll
right.
do any good, but no,
I mean, I
this
think
is my
starting
feeling
with our
about it.
rep, starting with our rep is the way, you know, is one way to let her know that this is a problem for us. Christie,
Yeah,
you
Hi.
could do that.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, in trying to think about being on the legislative committee and writing these words and trying to figure it out, it makes sense if you're looking at a downtown somewhere that has water and sewer where there are larger lots, right? Because there are some towns, and I mean, I'm sure we could look at all the water and sewer areas where they see opportunity for more development. And like you were saying, Virginia, where you don't have to, it doesn't have to be the 0.2 acre lot with the 4 units. It could be that there are 2 acre lots in a water and sewer area, and they're saying, we want to allow 4 units on, you know, a lot. And so
Illegally.
I think that, you know, that seems laudable, right? Like, don't have, you know, suburban 1 acre sprawl on
Right.
water sewer areas. But when we look at existing older, small, dense, like we do live on 0.2 acre lots. All of our lots are about 0.2 acres or smaller, right? Like, that is what we have already, right? And so I think that it is hard writing a state law as one size fits all when we have these smaller towns that already have what I think is the intent. And I mean, I'd be willing to go with Allison to the legislature and, you know, talk to them about these differences and how do we really craft language that isn't going to have these unintended consequences of forcing or incentivizing our retiring residents to sell to the investors.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say how
Thank
do we
you.
craft language, it's like, how do we get this legislature to craft language?
Oh, right.
So we can't craft language that defies
Well,
the
the legislators are
intent.
people just like us. Like we can talk to Jana. We can, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, that's a start, I think, is talking to Jana and saying that this is a concern. I mean, this isn't her area of expertise, but that's okay. I think it would be easy to have a meeting with her that you could come to, Allison, whoever wanted to come to this meeting, could express this to her, that we have a problem with this.
yeah.
So,
And I'd like to do that before changing our regulations, because I think if we go forward to change them, I don't want to waste the time and the energy to change them when I don't really think that this is what we should be doing. I think if there is some confusion and we say that, oh, the state law says this, well, then people can look back at the state statute and interpret that. But I don't think that we should be codifying that in a certain way to try to piecemeal it into our zoning right now. I want to get clarity on what this is really supposed to be.
Well, I would say we have gotten clarity from the state.
we've gotten clarity
Yeah.
that this is what this is supposed to be. So, you know, we'll change it again if we can get somewhere with it. We'll change it back.
But have we
Change it to
gotten
something
clarity
else.
that it's supposed to be 20 units per acre?
We have gotten clarity that you cannot increase the size of the acre, of the size of the lot to put a 3 to 4 unit building. And the reason that they specify that is because I think people pushed back with Act 47 about this density question. You know, they pushed back against it. And so now this is their clarifying correction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's
and we were sent-
contradictory.
Yeah, we were sent by the select board to align it,
To align.
specifically align it with 181.
With the statute, which is
Right.
different than the Department of Housing's interpretation. I do
No,
think
this
that
is the
there's.
statute.
This is, yeah,
This is the statute.
But the
That's what it says.
interpretation, oh, I know, I can read it, but.
Yeah.
But I feel like the statute does not say 20 units per
no,
acre.
it does not.
No,
It
it
is
says the
inferred.
same size. You can't require additional land.
Right, and I think that that's where there's this hole. I think that there's a hole in the statute where if it said 20 units per acre, that's one thing, but it says, 5 or more units per acre.
Well, that's the minimum.
Well, right, but we go back to the one size fit all approach where there could be 2 acre lots in a water and sewer area, but
Mhm.
that's not the case here.
Mhm.
And I think that that's where there's this hole. And I really think that we need to I would love to sit down with other folks from the state and with the people on the Legislative Housing Committee who wrote this and say, this is the situation here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, we can put it into our, it doesn't matter one way or the other whether we put it into our regulation really, because it has to be administrated by the zoning department the way the statute is written.
Right.
So this is the way it's written. You can't require any more land, so we might as well put that in our regulation and, change it if we find that they want to change it. Maybe they want it to allow 20 units per acre. I don't know, we don't know that. But the way it's written right now, that's the way it
I
is.
think it's a given. That's what they wanted. I mean, by stating 4 units as opposed to a single to be aligned with a single family dwelling. And they're telling you that, yeah, it's 20 acres a unit. I mean, 20 acres, 20 units
20
an
units
acre.
an acre.
But then the next sentence, they say 5 units per acre.
Well, that's when,
That was Act 47. That was a whole year ago.
Yeah.
And that was,
But it's in the same statute.
Right, but you can still that's for subdividing the 5 units per acre. So a 3 to 4 is considered one principal dwelling. Right, so you have one multifamily dwelling, that's one principal dwelling. Or one principal structure, I should say, with 4 units in it.
I'm not following what you're saying right now, but what I am saying is that the language in the statute is contradictory from one line to the next. And that is where there's the hole. And that's the problem when we edit things over years by changing just certain words.
Well, the statute.
We were all on the same page like half an hour ago, and I know this is really frustrating, but I really would like to talk. This affects my neighborhood
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
and I really would love to talk to the state folks and the legislators or Jana Brown
Mhm.
to get clarification on this before we change our town zoning to do our best to take the state's interpretation of the inconsistent legislative statute and our best interpretation of
The
that.
legislative language is the law. Legislative language. So if the legislative language says you have to, on the same size lot, allow the 3 to 4 unit dwelling. It is at least 5 units per acre. It's at least 5
Right, but
units.
is
per
it
acre.
5, maybe we could do 5 units per acre, like in a big neighborhood? Does it have to be 5 units per acre on a 0.2 acre lot?
They
It
have-
doesn't, so
They
what are
have
those options?
clarified that to say that if you allow 5 units per acre, to allow 5 units per acre, you must have a minimum lot size of 0.2 acres. It's minimum, you don't have to do that, but you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to have if you subdivide, you can subdivide your 1 acre into 5.2 acre lots
Or 0.4 acre into.
and
2.
put a 3 and 4 unit on that 0.2 acres.
Sure, you can do that, you don't have to do that.
You don't have to. Well,
Right.
we're not saying you have to either. We're just saying that we
Well-
can't forbid it, because that's what they tell us. We can't prohibit it.
I just think that there's more work to be done. I think that the majority of the commissioners at this meeting have concern about this. I think that it would be irresponsible to go forward and turn this back to the select board. I think that there is more work to be done, and I'm willing to help and go to the legislature and figure this out. I care about this. This is my neighborhood.
Okay, I think Mark was next, and then Ian, and then Allison.
Actually, Ian had his hand up first.
Okay, Ian, you're first, and then Mark, and then Allison.
Me first, okay. So are we like in violation of something by not having this on the books right now?
Not necessarily, I would say, but
No.
I am required to administer it as it is enacted.
So if somebody came with an application, you'd have to go by these guidelines.
Right.
You would have to go by the state law,
Right,
which supersedes our law.
so currently it's a moot point whether or not we send it to the select board right now. Because if someone really wanted to press us on it, they could just invoke the state statute.
Yeah.
If they wanted to lawyer up or something, but. It doesn't make any, is there anything we can do to buy ourselves some time, or is it, there's no time to be bought because of what I just said?
Well,
Sorry,
if somebody wanted to put a 3 to 4 unit building on a 0.2 acre lot, they could do it because it's allowed by state law.
Yeah.
So they could do it since June 17th, 2024.
right,
So, I mean, to my mind, it's more transparent to put it in our zoning if it's in the state law, but I understand the points that have been made.
Mhm.
And the select board, our problem is, this is what the select board instructed us to do, which the planning commission has to do. I
Yeah.
mean, we
Mhm.
could refuse, but what's the point of that when it's in the state statute? So, I don't know either.
It's in process. I guess you could go to the select board and petition them not to accept it, even though I would still be required to administer it. But I don't know where that's gonna get you, to be honest with you.
I think the real goal is to get somebody's ear in Montpelier and try to
Yep.
clarify this thing. Or see if we can make some changes in our favor.
Well, we've gotten the clarification. I tell you that from the state.
Yeah.
And the intent of the legislators is definitely something that's at issue, for sure. I can't speak for what they've done, and I don't think anybody really can. I don't even know if they can, to be honest with you. But, at this point, from a process point of view, we've been charged with getting this back to the select board at some point. We've been given the direction per statute to do that. So however this committee wants to go forward with that is totally up to you. I mean, I have no
And we
control
did
over that.
speak against it at the select board, saying that it did not seem like this was
With
correct.
the proviso that I have to administer it
With the
for,
proviso that the zoning department has to administrate it the way the state statute is written. So
that's up to you guys, yeah.
there are some other benefits of having the neighborhoods carved out of the HDR and the ag res district. That this is good for these VRN districts. So, to my mind, you might as well put it in the regulation so it's transparent as to what the law actually is. And then we will have these districts that also meet the other requirements of Act 47 and of the neighbors who have requested some of the items that are in here. So, anyway, that's my feeling about it. Mark, you're next.
Yeah, me and Christie have great points about this. I think we all do. We all think this is insane.
Yeah.
And current interpretation of the zoning does allow for 3 and 4 unit apartments in the district. And when you guys sat down with the select board, did they really fully comprehend what they were telling you to do? Which is to allow 4-unit apartment buildings on 0.2 acres. That was the whole, the 5 of them got to agreed that, oh yeah, that's something that we're good with. Go back and change the zoning regs.
They heard
it, yeah.
it from us. We explained how it would allow for 20 units per acre if somebody really wanted to subdivide and to meet the statutory requirement. We explained that to them and they said, you just have to align it with the state. I don't know how deeply they thought about it, frankly, Mark, I mean.
I can't imagine they thought too deeply about it because I haven't
Yeah.
thought deeply about it, but it's just it's in, any kind of thought to this and everybody's taken aback. I've got half a mind to leave it as is, because it is insane, and why change our zoning to reflect an insane concept that's probably going to get corrected. And we all know what the issues are with revising zoning districts, and the time and effort put into that. But on the other flip side, the select board, you told them exactly what that said. The select board said, oh yeah, that's good. Let's change our zoning to that, and sent it back to us. So, as foolish, and I could think of a few more adjectives, but as that concept appears, you're telling us that the select board wants us to do it. So then let's just do it, and it'll be on them because you clearly made a point to them of what that's saying. And they're like, yeah, do it anyways. Well, they're our bosses. They're telling us to do that. the discussion is moot on our end if it's really clearly a directive from the select board to do that. So let's just do it and move on. Cause we got plenty of other things.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and we did get a copy of the exact motion that was made. Because I also questioned
Yeah.
whether they actually did make that motion to align it with 181. And we got a question, out of the minutes of their meeting, the actual motion that was made, and this was the motion that was made. It's align it with 181. So, I think we should do it, and I think we should then carry on with speaking with Jana Brown and telling her that this is not something that we wish to have in our zoning. And what are they doing about it, and she needs to go find out, because this is not her area of expertise. She will not know the answer to the question, but she's responsive, and she will go and find out, we will say, talk to the people. Is this the intent? We'll have to explain it very carefully to her, what the implications are, what the unintended or intended, we don't know which, consequences are. Possibly, we're not requiring anybody to do it. Nobody's going to do it right away, obviously, but it's going to be allowable.
Mhm.
So,
do we have a timeline or a deadline on this modification? Do we have a reasonable time to now go and talk to Montpelier and say, is this really what you meant? It sounds like everything else that you've done has demonstrated that everybody else is interpreting this all the same way, even though it's foolish. And if our select board has told us to do that, then foolish or not, that's they're the boss. I say do it and be done with it. And then we'll come back in a year after the next legislative session and fix it to be right. But they told us to do it. It's a pretty clear directive. Let's get rid of it and be done with it. And it'll be on their shoulders.
Yeah, and that's kind of the purpose of tonight is to go ahead and promulgate that.
Yeah,
And then get back to them, but there is no date certain, Mark, that they dictated to us.
Yeah, they removed the date.
There is correct.
It was suggested to be sent back in December, but they removed that date. So
Yep.
we do have time to look into this before we have to get it back to the select board.
The select board told us to do it.
the select board told us to do it.
Yeah.
Some people are waiting on the other
Let's just,
pieces of this, the
Yes,
VRNs that have been in process for a while. So there's that
there's,
timeline.
yeah, there's much other good stuff in those changes.
Yeah, exactly.
We should,
Allison, I think you, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
oh no, that was the end of my point.
Okay. Allison, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Well, yes, I do, and I'm not sure how helpful this is, but and I certainly would offer that I'm willing to go to Montpelier and rattle some cages if and especially if somebody'd like to come along with me. But basically, I don't know what science they have based on this idea that we need to expand the number of the houses in our town or make our neighborhoods more busy, because we've already experienced just in the past 1 year 2 terrible floods that have made a lot of damage to people's homes. And I think that maybe the people in Montpelier that I'm saying that I'm sure everyone's intentions are good. I assume everybody's intentions are altruistic, but some of these things people are not aware of how vulnerable the soil conditions and the flood dangers are. And those people who own homes, we've had people come to the planning commission saying, well, how can I got all this water in my cellar and I want to be able to build something down there. Can I have a permit to build something in a place that you can't build anything? I'm not sure that the people who are making some of these decisions in Montpelier are completely aware of the rather unique situations that are in Richmond that are not in some of the neighboring towns. And I'd be willing,
But we can certainly go, we can.
Yeah.
We can start with Jana and find out what the process is for talking
Yes.
about these issues.
Yeah.
That's something that we can pursue as well as,
The parallel track.
yeah, it's a
and
parallel.
I'm willing to work on that. So,
Yeah, okay,
I'm just,
great.
and I don't know if I'll get anywhere, but I'm willing to make that effort. They need to have that information in Montpelier.
Yeah. They're very focused on making housing, but anyway, Ian, you had something
I
else?
know.
For zoning.
Yeah, this will be my last hurrah. So it's kind of a question to Christie, like what would you like this to look like? Like, but would you advocate for any liberalization of the density in your neighborhood, or would you prefer that it kind of stays how it is?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Ian. I do think that the current zoning allows for duplexes to be where there is a single family house as it stands, no matter what the size lot is. The first iteration of these zoning changes changed it so that it was just 5 units per acre and 1 unit per 0.2 acres. And so this second change added in that duplexes should be allowed wherever there is a single unit. So that is a good change. So I do think that duplexes allowed wherever there is a single family house allowed is a good change. So if we have 0.2 acre lots has a single family house, you could also have a duplex on a 0.2 acre lot. That totally makes sense. That was not a part of last year or 2 years ago's revision. So I do think that that is good, but I do think that just looking at the 0.2 acre lots in my neighborhood, that I think that the 4 units is too much. So
Especially
that's,
since you have to go up to 35 feet most likely to get that to begin with. Yeah.
so, and I really do think that it's not necessarily about the density for me. It's really about, what's happening with investment properties, and we're really losing that middle housing. My neighborhood is affordable compared to the rest of the town. And
Yeah.
we will lose that, and we've already started to see that being lost.
I see your investment.
I think that just creates more income disparity across our town. And rents are twice as high as mortgages. So when we're creating investment properties, we're really setting up a disadvantage for anybody who's younger and moving in, because they're paying $2,000 a month and not investing in their homes, and it's not sustainable.
But this is a problem whether or not you have 3 to 4 unit buildings. I mean, it's a problem with the duplexes and the single family homes that are becoming investment.
Oh, sure.
properties as well.
Sure,
So, I mean, this may exacerbate it, but it's gonna happen anyway, most likely.
Virginia, you can't say that. It's gonna happen anyway, so we might as well just zone it for 4 units.
Well,
I'm sorry to be disrespectful, but I think it exacerbates the
Yeah.
problem.
it may exacerbate the problem. Anyway, this would be,
Yeah.
something that the planning commission could make a resolution to further pursue
Mhm.
changing it at the state level to allow for what we see as being necessary in our neighborhoods. So we could do that. I think that would be fine. I think we should probably do what the select board wants, as Mark suggested, but at the same time, we could resolve that we were going to see if we could work on the state level. So you can think about that for a moment. There's one other thing about the VRNs that we wanted to change. It was not required by the select board. However, it was brought up by Bard, a select board member, to us, which is the elder care facilities that we said had to be, the majority of the beds had to be occupied by people of 55 or older, or 60 or older. The lawyer suggested 55 or older. He didn't seem to have a problem with it, but anyway, Bard felt that this was discriminatory. It was an age discrimination, but it was a problem from the anti-discrimination point of view. And we had the same concern coming from a different direction about the Jolena Court, some bits of the Jolena Court density bonus, that there was a definite, in fair housing, you have to be very careful about age discrimination. So discriminated against people who weren't over 55.
Right.
So what we had in the original definition of elder care facilities was these three things: assisted living residences, hospice, and nursing home. So in order to satisfy Bard's concern, which was going to be brought up if we didn't do anything about it at the select board and probably sent back to us to be fixed again, was just to take out the reference to age and put in the three things that were mostly lived in by people who were 55 or older: assisted living residences, hospice, and nursing homes.
Under the umbrella of elder care.
It was under the umbrella of elder care, but we just took out the words elder care so as not to be discriminatory. And we put in to the definitions section, the definitions of these things: assisted living residence, hospice, and nursing home, that we got out of the statute. So to us, that didn't rise to the level of a major change, because it was actually just the things that were in the elder care. And we didn't want to be accused of having age discrimination. So I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say about that before we go back to the question of this document. So the changes that are in the document are: in the two districts, we have these assisted living residence, hospice, and nursing home under conditional uses instead of elder care.
Right.
In each one of the districts, the neighborhoods north and the neighborhoods south. So that's what the changes are in the actual district entries.
The
in section
VRNs and the
3,
VRSs.
the
Yes.
VRNS and the VRNN. And then all the density, the residential density changes
Okay.
come in the residential density section, which explains what residential density is. And the language there is just what we've talked about, which is number B, any district that allows residential, in any district that allows residential uses. That is not just the VRNs, but across the town. A duplex counts as one dwelling unit. And this is what we already previously had in the zoning. So
Yeah.
that's not a big change. So this is in both in the VRNs and in the rest of the town.
Amongst others, yep.
A single family dwelling with an ADU is still one, and one duplex is still one. So then number C is specific to districts served by municipal water and sewer. 1 3 to 4 unit multifamily building shall count as one dwelling unit. And we could put in that sentence instead the exact language from the statute, which says on any lot, you are prohibited from requiring additional land for, you know what I mean? We could put the exact statutory language in there. That would be an option.
It's basically this.
But it's basically this. It's basically you're counting it as one dwelling unit, except for the parking question, which is sort of a little interesting. In D, in a district not served by municipal water and sewer that allows residential uses, each dwelling unit in a 3 to 4 multifamily building counts as one dwelling unit. So in the AR, for instance, if you put up a 3 to 4 multifamily dwelling building, each dwelling unit counts as one dwelling unit
That's 1 acre zoning right now.
because it's not required by the statute to allow those on the same lot as the single family dwelling. So, and then the final one, E, in any district that allows residential uses, each dwelling unit in a multifamily building with 5 or more units shall count as one dwelling unit. So, and that, you know, that's another kind of weird little thing about this is if you put up a building with 5 dwelling units, they're counted as 5 dwelling units. If you put up a building with 4 dwelling units, the whole building is only counted as one dwelling
And you
unit.
need an acre for that 5-1.
Yeah, and you need an acre for the 5.
That's to your point, Kristen.
So, you know, this possibly wasn't
Fun to
clearly
administer.
thought out exactly how this was gonna work because they're trying to fix the housing problem and
Through
this
zoning.
is their through zoning.
That's always,
which is
I'm always
not
gonna
the
add that
problem.
through zoning. There are other ways that you can go about this.
So our choices here are, to cut to the chase, we can either say, okay, select board, we've done what you said. Here is the document back. The full red line of the whole zoning document with these changes. And it's over to you, and you now can have your public hearing that you will hear the same comments
Right.
that we heard exactly. And, you know, possibly from us as well as other people, you will hear the same comments. And then they are going to have to decide what they want to do.
So we're obligated to get it back to them.
So that's, yes, we are obligated to get it back to them, but there is not a timeline, so we can sit on it. I don't know. We've got a lot of other things that we're sitting on.
In a town plan, we gotta take care of.
So whether
Yeah.
that's useful or not, it's a problem with the statute, and that's more the select board's responsibility to be aware of. We can also, at the same time, we could make a resolution that we were going to discuss this with at least our representative and seek relief from it. I mean, it's not clarification that we seek because we already have had clarification. It's relief from being required to do this.
Yeah.
So do we wanna? oh,
So-
I'll let you.
Yeah. So do we want to do that? Do we want, in which case we would have to have a motion to do that, or do you all want to do something different from that?
Sure.
Can you give me the board back so I can see
I'm
if
sorry.
people are raising their hands?
I'm just gonna say that I would like to make a motion that we make the changes as directed by the select board, send it back to them. And like you very aptly pointed out, they're gonna hear from the town at their level. But they've directed us to do something. Yes, we could still also, and I think it would be wise for us to continue on with contacting Montpelier folk and trying to figure out, or city leagues and towns, whatever, try to find out the truth behind this. But let's just do what they said because they're our bosses. We'll send it back to them. And then when the community comes back and gives them all sorts of grief because of the craziness of this stipulation, then they can kick it back to us. But let's not waste a lot of time on it ourselves, other than trying to get some clarification from state reps about the real interpretation, which sounds pretty cut and dry, needs to be fixed.
Yeah. And
Now,
we really have gotten clarification. This is what they want it to say.
right,
So, all right, so are you making that motion that
that was made, that we approve the changes as directed by the select board and forward the document back to them.
And are you okay with the recommended change of elder care to those three things? That was not required at that hearing, but we subsequently heard from Bard, who represented himself, but you know,
I'd like to amend my motion to include the change of language so as not to specifically call out an age-related group.
okay,
Perfect.
sounds good. Is there a second to that?
Don't be shy.
Well, I could make a second to that motion. So I will second the motion. There's discussion. It looks like Alice and Ian, you want to talk about this because you're not seconding the motion. Ian,
Can you tell me, who's gonna contact Jana Brown and when?
It's not part of this motion.
yeah,
know.
that's
Well,
not
I'm not gonna vote in favor of this motion unless I know that, I guess.
well, I can say that I will contact Jana Brown and let you know when she's available to speak to, and also let Christy know and you know, the rest of the planning commission and anyone else who wants to be involved in that. Allison has volunteered to be, so.
And is that something that would happen, pretty
Yeah, sure.
quickly?
Yeah,
Okay,
I can email her and, you know, by the time the select board holds its next hearing on this, we may have further, you know, we may have further things that we want to bring to that meeting and tell them about. So, yes.
I don't want to be a brat. I just want to respect the wishes of people who have spoken here, so.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, Allison, you want to say something about this discussion about this motion on the floor?
This sounds ridiculous, but I'm just still thinking. I'm not sure what I think is the right way to go about this. I just feel that more information needs to be gathered, and there needs to be more communication with the people in the state who are making these rules. I don't think that they understand or have access to all the information that they need, and they were doing the best they could. And I guess I need to think about it a little bit more, and that's not very helpful tonight. I'm sorry.
No, there's a motion.
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. I seconded it. Motion made by Mark. All in favor of forwarding this directed, as per their direction, language back to the select board for their public hearing process should say aye. I'm saying aye. Mark?
I'm also saying aye.
Aye. Ian
I'll say aye.
is aye. Allison?
Yeah, I'll say aye.
All right. So we will send it to them. We will continue to investigate it, get as far as we can, bring the information with us to the select board, along with people who will hopefully come to the select board also, and will have been involved in the discussion with the state, you know, as far as we can get. So, all right. Great. So that is that item. Problematic. I totally agree. All right, so we're going to move on to our next item, which we have some guests now here for. Hess and Jean.
And Fran is there.
And Fran is on the Zoom. And so item number 6 on our agenda, to review public input from the Flood Hazard Overlay District public hearing and discuss proposals for accommodating these requests. So in the memo that I sent out,
Let me pull that up.
the public hearing information in the minutes wished to do the following things. These were the requests. Allow a similar in-use structure to replace the current band shell. Thank you, Christy. By way of a more flexible definition, if the town decides they want to replace the band shell with some other structure. That's one concern. Allow for a fence around the playground if it is moved to the plateau. This would be a new structure, but it would be essential for the playground. Another request was to allow for features that provide accessibility to the structures on the plateau in particular. And also allow, such as the restroom or the and shell-like structure or the playground, and also allow for possible other sports structures like field hockey goals that are not currently existing, along with the existing soccer goals. So what we did to address this is we worked with the definitions and with the non-conforming structures section. The use of the fact that these are existing structures, i.e. non-conformities, because they wouldn't be allowed now, but they were legal, we assume, when they were put up, so they're non-conforming. So we work with definitions we can start with the definition that allows a band shell-like structure. We'll start with that one. We added the definition of an open-air recreational structure. So this will give our zoning administrator a way to think about the band shell, but would allow some other kind of structure like a pavilion to go in. So the open-air recreational structure is a structure consisting of a roof and one or more open sides. So it's not a building, because if it has 4 closed sides, it's a building. It's an open air because it has one open side. There may or may not be a constructed floor. The use of the structure is to provide a sheltered outdoor space for gatherings such as, performances, picnicking, sheltering, etc. Open or air recreational structures include, but are not limited to, band shells, bandstands, gazebos, and pavilions.
Bam.
So what this would do this would allow the zoning administrator to say, okay, since you can relocate the band shell use, which now comes under open air structure, you can reconstruct it like some other kind of open air structure.
It gives you a blank slate, sort of.
So barring any unusual interpretation of that,
No promises.
no promises, unfortunately, but this at least allows for the non-conforming use of the band shell, which is a sheltering structure. The use is non-conforming, but it can be any of these things, a band shell, a bandstand, a gazebo, or a pavilion. I looked to see if there were any other kinds of open air recreation structures. There are those things with lattice roofs, but that didn't seem to fit in here. Anyway, it says, but not limited to these things. So if you can think of anything else that might be an open, one side open. at least one side open, or more than one side can be open. So that's that. The way that we're dealing with that. We also, while we're here, we put playground equipment as the structures. So that the structures are just the pieces of equipment. It's not the playground itself, because you can arrange these things any way you want with any amount of chips or fiber on the side, in between. The playground is not an issue, the playground, it's only the structures that are an issue. So our zoning administrator has a category in which to put these things, poles, and ramps and all that. This is the category that he can put them in.
And it also states you can have a fence.
And it also states you can have a fence. So that's to allow the fence, and we've also allowed that somewhere else, but. All right, so another couple of things, we can go back to our incidental structures that we had originally. It's forwards to backwards to incidental
backwards.
structures. Yeah, so we had originally introduced the concept of incidental structures to allow to be placed in the park without getting a permit for everyone, things like refuse containers, picnic tables, dog waste bag dispensers, I added that part in there. Poles, cancer canopies. We put the soccer goals and the other goals in here. We looked at the measurements of them. They are 150 square feet or less. With their ground contact. So that is how the soccer goals would be allowed. They will be under incidental structures, which are allowed without permits in the floodway, which is what we need here. So I don't know if you guys have any comments about that.
Well, I think maybe such as covers this, but signage or, yes, like a kiosk kind of thing that we were talking about at Brown's Court. I'm just wondering,
Oh,
a sign like that is down by the Huntington Gorge, just a, you know,
a small sign
Yeah.
under 150 square feet.
yeah,
I
with,
mean, we don't have any there now. I don't know what, but you.
no, and I know that
Might
we
want to
just need
put,
some signage also around the playground, but I think that counts as the playground part, but I'm just,
okay,
welcome to the, welcome to
Okay.
volunteer green sign. I mean, would that count
right, okay.
Yes.
under
You
that?
haven't-
It might, you say such as, so maybe that.
Is there not a sign for volunteers green there? Doesn't it say volunteers green there? So
Well, there's that huge boxy thing of
Monument.
rocks with the big stone slab, that all got
Yeah.
washed.
Yeah.
That's already there.
I know it was just, I remember the farmer's market mentioning that, like something where they could say coming up, the performer this week's going to be so-and-so.
yeah, I don't.
Just one of those, I just,
So we have to make it absolutely not an issue. But we could think about that, I guess.
Well, I mean,
It might
that may be able to fall under incidental structures with footprints of 150 square feet or less.
Yeah.
Definitely can't have a sign greater than 150 square feet.
right.
Yeah,
Probably a big
24
sign.
square feet, I believe, is the largest at this point, but and it's de minimis to a use. Yeah,
Do we want to put signs in there
I
just on the
don't think it's
list?
a problem. We could probably put signs in there, but I don't want a 149-foot sign in there, though. That's
Small signs,
yeah,
too vague, I don't know.
event signs.
Informational
We
kiosk.
could work through that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
add something about signs.
That's easy. Compared to the other stuff we've been doing.
And it only struck me right now, so.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that would be the place that it would go, I would think, because they're pretty incidental and um,
And it would be illustrative to have it in there stating that,
yeah,
no,
okay,
not
You know,
an
that's-
illustration, but.
Area that even says the dogs must be on a leash,
Yeah,
no
right.
parking allowed, that
Yeah.
kind of a thing. where you-
right,
A bulletin board under a cover.
Yeah, there are some exemptions in the sign ordinance that allows for that type, like directional signs, signs, political signs, there's a few other
but not
exemptions.
specific to the flood hazard overlay
no.
district, so,
And it would be an assemblage of materials, so
right. So we'll put something in.
put it in
those.
an incidental, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, then we back up a little bit. And we put in a definition of the footprint of a structure, because that seemed to be an issue as to what constituted the footprint of a structure.
So sorry.
So the footprint of a structure is the area where the structure is in contact with or directly above the ground as measured in square feet. So if you think, for instance, of a soccer goal, there's a U-shaped pipe on the ground, but there's also the pipe and the net above the ground, which is an impediment to water. So it's whatever is above, directly above the ground is part of the footprint of the structure. I
Yeah.
don't know if you all have any comments about that, but it seems to be a need to identify what the footprint of a structure is. So it's what's in contact with the ground, not including incidental structures, because they're their own thing. But, so for instance, the playground structures, it's what is in contact with the ground, plus the pieces that are directly above the ground, like the ramps and the climbing wall, stuff like that, because we're trying to think, okay, what about this is an impediment of the water?
Right.
It's what is above what's in contact with the ground. So we added that definition in there. And we also added the definition of degree of flood hazard, because that's a term that occurs in several other places. So the degree of flood hazard is how likely it is that this is going to be an impediment to the water, which is what it means. So,
And if we're not allowing expanding in the floodway, the degree of flood hazard doesn't increase,
right.
at least.
So in order
Principally.
to protect the function of the floodplain, which is to not have any more than you need in the floodway, you don't want to add additional obstructions in the floodway or decrease the size of the floodway in any way. So you can think about that. I think that was all the definitions that we needed to get to those concerns. Then the other place that we made changes was in the nonconformity section itself, which is where the meat of this.
616?
Yeah, 6.8.15, non-conforming structures. So this is to allow you, which previously has not been the case, it's to allow the DRB to allow for the relocation of structures within the floodway. This was not previously something you could do. So under the nonconformities, the DRB section is broken down into two pieces. What the DRB needs to look at if it's not in the floodway, but in the other part of the floodplain. So it's outside the floodway, but still in floodplain. And then the second part of the DRB's work is almost identical, but is related to the floodway, just to the floodway itself, because what you can do in the floodway is you can't enlarge the structure. What you can't do in the floodway that you can do in the other part of the flood hazard zone. And that's primarily to allow people who have residences in the floodplain to put an addition on or whatever with their own property, to deal with their property by putting an enlargement. So we had people who wished to do that. In the floodway, we are not allowing for an increase in size. You can do all those other things in the floodway, which is relocate, where is it here?
Is it A or? Replacement, reconstruction location of an existing within the floodway, enlarging the footprint of a structure is considering increasing the degree of nonconformity.
Right, in the floodway, you can't enlarge it. But you can, move it. You can, let's see, blah, blah, blah.
Now you can't move it, you can't enlarge it because that's what our current zoning regulations say? Just to be clear?
You can't enlarge it because we haven't added that in. I mean, you can't do it under our current regulations and you can't do it under the new ones because of the goal of not placing any more impediments
Who's
in
going,
the,
that's
in the
your
floodway.
own
But
in-
you can replace it, you can restore it, you can reconstruct it, you can relocate it, or you can reduce it in size.
So that's what you're telling the Three Parks Committee, what they can or cannot do. That's your own personal decision to not allow that. That is not what the potential zoning regulations could allow. So I just want to make that clear for those who are present, who are actually interpreting it. I've been repeating myself regularly on this issue and being soundly ignored, but just want to make that clear so that the
In-
Three Parks Committee does know that they have the flexibility. They, according
Well,
to
I don't believe that to be true. I think that is a misconception.
that they
So
enlarge structures.
that, yes, so in the template that our current zoning is taken from the ANR's template for floodplain hazard regulations. And they are not allowing you to increase the degree of flood hazard.
That's not
Which-
true. Talk to the guy at the state who runs the department. Who
We've also talked to him.
said that's not the correct interpretation. That's
Yeah,
your
so
interpretation. That is
our-
not its interpretation.
we have found that he is not saying what you're saying. So we have a disagreement there, Mark.
We do have a disagreement, and
Yes, we,
I soundly do not agree with your interpretation. And I don't think we should have to live by your interpretation. This is what you did. What we can do is reduce the degree of impact, but that doesn't necessarily mean we have to keep every structure the same size. Those are two entirely different concepts. If you're moving a park from the depth of the floodway where it is up to an area that is technically floodway, but in reality is just floodplain, but we are significantly lessening the effects of the park by moving it up. You could enlarge that and still you could double the size of the and the playground, and you could still reduce the effect of the impact of the park. So I'm sick of saying it. I'm sick of repeating myself. I'm dropping out of this conversation, and you guys can do how you want. And the Three Parks knows this position too now, I hope. And if they're willing to go along with what you've dictated, then that's what they can do.
Fran,
Maybe again.
hello, Fran, you're muted.
Okay, thanks. First of all, I want to go back to where your definitions are, and I
Yeah.
think you did, and my hand was up then, but didn't get
Oh,
notice.
Sorry.
That's all
Okay.
right. But I think that you have done a good job on those revising the definitions to allow us to do what we want, what we think we want to do up there. You know, I think that's giving us some flexibility that we don't have under the current regulations. I also want to say there is a sign on the plateau level on the bank. It's not very big, and I think it has letters that you have to use. So if we could just replace that sign with something more useful within the guidelines, I think that would be helpful. You know, to be able to do something maybe to replace that sign.
Yeah, well, we could, you know, if it's an incidental structure, if we put signs in there, you would be able to put a sign.
Right.
And then you could
Okay.
take it away. I'm not sure, you know, I don't know how the big sign with the stone platform and so forth. You know, I don't know if you all want to move that or take it away, or it was a problem when the last flood happened.
That was an
So-
Eagle project, and I'm not sure how it got, you know, how it got there, and certainly if we have a flood and it tips, you know, gets undermined again, it probably ought to be moved.
Yeah. So anyway, so, you know, that
Uh,
could be moved under the nonconformities being relocated section, or you could put up a different sign and take that one away if you wanted to
Right.
do.
Um,
It all has to be within the parameters of the sign ordinance.
Right, yes, yeah, and I
So-
understand those.
Yeah,
Right.
That's the underlying.
So if we talk about the area you're talking about now, which to me would relate to the restroom facility and maybe creating a restroom facility up above. Is that, am I correct in understanding that if we were to take the restroom facility down
Yeah.
and put something maybe smaller up above, that would be allowed?
Yeah,
Yes.
or the same
Oh.
size, or the same use.
Mhm.
So restroom, a bigger restroom without the concession stand, you know, if it's the same size building, if you wanted to do that, or however you
Because
wanted it as a restroom.
Yeah, but, and you know, the hope would be if we did that, we would be reducing the impediments to the flood. You know, my hope would be that whatever we propose would probably be smaller than what's there and more flood resilient.
Well, that's the goal, is to make anything in the floodway smaller and more resilient. I mean, really, that's the goal for a floodway, is to not have stuff there
Yeah.
and
So,
smaller, so.
so I think what you're telling me is what I want to hear.
Fantastic.
I mean, I've got, you know, I'll have to look at it again and maybe go over it
Yeah.
with you again, but I
Right.
think,
Go over
I
it
think-
again.
I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. And we have allowed for porta potties. Where did we put that? Did we put that in incidental structures
Did
or
we?
in temporary
I
structures?
think in temporary
We've,
structure.
yeah, I forgot to mention that in temporary structures, of which there was already a definition, which we left there. We added
Right.
porta potties. Because that way you could have a porta potty down there by the baseball diamonds.
Well, it's not there in temporary structure.
there.
No, no,
That's the, but we'll get that in there.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
put it somewhere.
I thought we did too.
I thought we put it in incidental structures because we thought they weren't gonna be bigger than
Well, let's
hundred
take a
and fifty
look.
square
Let's
feet.
take a look, see. Refuse can pick out dog waste, better, turn to dog goals and other structures are not, no.
No, it doesn't say that.
Okay, well, that was the intent,
Should
was
gonna-
to put porta potties there. Cause a porta potty is not gonna be bigger than hundred and fifty
What
square
do we do,
feet,
just
right?
talk about it and not do it?
I thought we put it in.
I thought we did too.
Okay, well, anyway, so besides signs, we would like to put portable potties or whatever they're called, portable toilets.
Really nice
Okay,
one.
Because some of the baseball player parents thought that their little children would not like to go all the way to the restroom and use the
The
porta
back
potty, and the
40.
little boys wouldn't care anyway, that it was porta potty. So that's that.
Okay.
So anything else, Fran, you wanted to say before I go on to these other two things that we added into the non-conforming structures section?
thus far I'm good.
Okay, Ian,
Sorry, I was muted. I'm gonna wait until you finish your,
okay. All right, so
Sure.
the other things that were important for the goals were something that the DRB would be not the zoning administrator in charge of, but relates to the accessibility and the fence.
That's right.
So in the nonconformities, what you're allowed to do that's governed by the DRB includes, we added an item, a reasonable degree of accessibility to a non-conforming structure or use may be provided in addition to the footprint of the non-conforming structure, as long as the flood hazard is not increased beyond that of the structure to be accessed. And this is mostly things are on the ground that are the accessibility structures. Additional on-ground improvements should be the minimum needed to achieve accessibility. This is because you don't want to be putting any more pavement than you need to be putting. And reasonable in this context means accepting the current terrain. In other words, if it's too steep for a wheelchair, you can't put fill in. So that there's some degree of assistance that might have to be given, or for some other kinds of disabilities, assistance might need to be given. And in the ADA itself, there's a lot of language about exemptions from strict compliance with all ADA requirements. There's discussion of what's reasonable, what is possible. I can give you all that language, but just to let you know that there's exceptions for structural impracticability. If it's impractical, you can't necessarily, full compliance is not required when you can demonstrate that it's structurally impractical. If full compliance is not practicable,
Great word.
you want to have compliance with as much as you can. In other words, so maybe for blind people, you just need bumps on the ground or something, even if you can't make the slope correct. You can make it as accessible as you can for other things. To the maximum extent feasible, they say. Paths of travel. To the maximum extent feasible, the path of travel to be altered to restrooms, telephones, drinking fountains, etc. It should be usable unless the cost and scope of such alterations is disproportionate to the cost of the overall alteration. So throughout the ADA language, there are these ways that it doesn't have to be exact. That is why I put reasonable, the word reasonable in there. If there's some other way that you want to write that, that refers you to the ADA statutes and their exemptions, then that's okay as far as I'm concerned. It's just we need to understand that it's not always going to be possible to have it completely ADA compliant.
Correct.
Specifically in a floodway.
Yeah, it's in the floodway. So anyway, so that's that item V in the floodway. And item VI is to allow for the fence, a safety fence around a non-conforming structure or use may be allowed as needed to protect children from contiguous dangers. The this fencing shall provide the least possible resistance to floodwaters and debris while still achieving its protective function. And that statement was actually taken out of the letter from Kyle Madash that he wrote in response, the email that he wrote to Mark in response to Mark's phone call that said the fence, we'd have to look at the details of, you want to allow debris to go through. In other words, like, don't make it chain link.
Right.
You want to make it, you know, maybe the bars, but the children can't get their head stuck through because every child wants to get their head stuck in the bars, so.
Maybe horizontal, right? Because
Or maybe horizontal and then have an area above the ground where there's room for the water. So that would be something that somebody should design who knows both about children.
Yeah.
Right.
And about fences.
And potentially could be like
Floodway.
breakaway fences or fences that can be removed if an impending flood is imminent. We'd be able to have time to remove it as opposed to be stuck in the ground, you know, with concrete or whatever. So.
Yeah, and even though it's less likely to flood on the plateau, the
Yeah.
plateau is still technically in the floodway, in the floodway. It's below the base elevation that takes it out of the floodway. So your regulations have to acknowledge that it is still in the floodway. So anyway, so those are the two items that relate to new structures that are not existing, pre-existing nonconformities that are being relocated. There are new structures, we're carving out special exemptions for them. So, and that is something that, you know, A&R has to look at. A&R has to look at this, of course, before we.
we'll
So Ian, did you have something to say now, or?
Yeah. So as far as Fran's concerned, this language as written is gonna allow the three parks committee to achieve their goals?
Yeah.
Yes. Is the answer, right?
Oh, so what was the question? Does it achieve their goal?
I mean, so these changes will allow the three parks committee to do what they want to do.
Well, this is what we're asking the three parks committee. There are three members here. Fran has got her hand up
Okay.
right now, so maybe she'll weigh in on that.
I think so. You know, we're still working on what we want to do, but I think this gives us a lot of flexibility to do what I think we would be interested in doing. I do have a question on if we have to keep the band shell. And when you were explaining about what can be done to make something accessible, can we add fill to make the band shell, the current band shell accessible? Can we, under this?
No, Phil
No.
is not allowed, but what would have to happen is the concrete floor would have to be slanted within the floor, I assume, to make it accessible. You know what I mean, Fran? So
Yeah.
there'd be a ramp leading up to it, and then within the current floor would be carved out a ramp that allowed you to get up onto the floor.
Okay, that's the only way that we could make the current band shell accessible.
If you were to leave the bench.
If you are, so it's possible that you're gonna leave the band shell. You don't know
Well,
that yet.
we don't know, but
Okay.
so, but I just, you know,
Right.
that's a,
Well, that's what we,
that's a
what we-
consideration.
You could do it that way. You could get in there by having a ramp up within the floor.
Within the current floor.
Right.
Yeah, okay. That's, I just want to understand that, but
Yeah.
other,
And if that is like a deal breaker or something, I don't know, it's possible. Adding fill is not looked favorably on adding fill. So,
well,
but
well, I'm, as you know, I'm somewhat biased, so I'm not I'm just trying to understand that, and
Right.
that is something that we use as we go forward in making our decisions. Do we keep the band shell? Do we do something different? Okay. So, and to answer Ian, I think, you know, I would want to look at this again, but I think you have gone done a great job at trying to address our concerns and allowing us to have much more freedom up there to create something that is great for the town. So I thank you for your efforts.
Okay.
well, that's the intent while still maintaining the floodway as a water storage facility. So, because of the floods. You guys want us weigh in on that?
No, I think I agree with Fran. I am just thinking about the accessibility. If you indeed put a ramp into that band shell, that would reduce the space for the performance space. It would really, you know, so I think it has to be something figured out around on the outside. And I know her question of Phil is just that you could, if you just could bring the berm up, that's a natural ramp. But
Right.
because
in the
I'm not
back
sure, I mean, who,
and the
you
side
know, there'd
or-
have to be other ways to design a ramp, one could come down and around or something that just, you
Yeah,
know, there, I think we just have to study those things.
yeah, well, we could
don't-
certainly think about that a little bit more, and we would
Mhm.
hope the DRB would think about it, but
Yeah.
you never know.
Yeah.
And I think you've explained, you know, one of my big concerns was to make sure that we make it accessible to the plateau itself. But I understand, and we were talking about accessible versus ADA guideline accessibility.
Right,
So I get that, the reasonable, I think that's,
right, because I think that
Unless
the
we-
ADA wanted to allow for the situations, I mean, like, we understand that the bridge is not actually ADA accessible.
right.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Shocking.
yeah, if you're in a wheelchair, you will have to have assistance, or you will have to have an electric wheelchair or something if you want to get over the bridge, so. We don't have to redesign that or anything,
Oh, yeah.
so,
Thank you. No,
Anything
thanks.
else?
Thank you.
yeah, okay. Chrissy, you had something you
Yeah,
wanted to
if
say.
you remove fill so that you could then add the fill for the ramp, so there's no net increase in fill, would that be allowable?
Oh, I'd have to see it. It'd be situational, I think. I would hesitate to answer that at this point. I have to see what you're designing and how that would work.
It's not in the template
No, it's
to
not.
remove, either to remove or add fill, I don't, is it?
Well,
To- to
remove
add-
is less, but
Right,
yeah.
to add fill is not in the template, but many towns have made that their flood hazard overlay district. I was looking at Huntington's the other day. Well, I noticed the language is exactly the same.
Exactly.
It's because it's from the template. So, you know, we could think about that if
Mhm.
you could take it dirt from somewhere else. I mean,
It should, I mean.
this is the question about math, you know,
it's a
what
question
what
about
you
common
open the
sense.
door to, if you say you can remove fill and put it somewhere else.
What does that open? Yeah.
It's one of those unintended consequence things. Can you remove as much fill as you want and put it, or should, you know, should there be a limit on the amount that you can actually remove and put somewhere else? Or, you know, what if you remove it from one place and put it in a place that's worse? So we just have to think about that more.
Without a LOMA or a letter of map change.
Right.
Now that's, and there would be a LOMA F, and that's arduous at best.
Right, that was the other thing is we were trying to do these without having you to get a lot of certifications. You know, like a certification by an engineer that this is not going to cause any additional degree of flood hazard.
Right.
Or a revision, a letter of revision, the Loma R or the Loma A. You know, if possible, we would like you to be able to do these things without acquiring that cost.
I think some of those units you'll have to acquire that cost, though, because
Some of
it has to
it-
be flood proofed.
Yeah,
It has to be brought up to
It's,
standard. So,
anyway, and it is not the case that you can do anything you want in the floodplain.
we go through a process, but yes. Can't snap your fingers, certainly not in the floodplain,
In the floodway, yeah,
not too.
so, yeah. So,
Thank you.
yeah. I will make a note about the question of putting some dirt from one place in the floodway to another place.
So where do we want to go from here?
Yeah, so we had, it's about 9 o'clock. We had scheduled some time on our next meeting. If we want to talk further about this. So if you all want to think about it and to look at it and cogitate about it.
Because ultimately this needs to go to the select board.
Yeah.
At some point.
So what has to
We have another
happen,
bite at the apple at the select board,
right,
so.
what has to happen is these changes, you know, we have to have a motion to
Get
approve
that.
these changes. And we could do that today, but it seems like maybe you all would want to maybe look at it a little bit more and we
Because
can
we're,
think about the signs and add
We
that
gotta add a
in.
little bit more thing, yeah.
Think about the fill question, moving fill around, what that
Yeah.
lets you in for. And then maybe at our next meeting, we can make a motion to send this language to the select board. And they have their public hearing process where any further suggestions can be made.
Right, and then they would kick it back to us, just like we do with the VRNs. And then it would go back to the select board for approval.
And at some point, it has to go to ANR for their approval, the Agency of Natural Resources. We have sent it to our attorney. But we didn't kind of get the feeling that maybe he knew a lot about floodplain regulations. He
Yeah, it
didn't
was
really have
concerning.
any comments much to make about it, so.
Yeah.
I don't think they're the crucial people to be sending it to, really. I mean, obviously, we don't
state.
want to be doing anything illegal. We try to avoid that. But ANR for sure has to look at it.
Mhm.
So if that's good
Okay,
with you guys.
we're on a roll.
Yep. Our next meeting is the 20th.
Jelly roll.
Okay, we just have a couple more
Real
things under new business to do. To go over. We have to talk with the commissioners. Oh, Allison, did you have anything you wanted to say about this at all? You haven't said anything about these regs, but. No, not right now. Okay. So we have to talk about our December and January meetings. December 18th, I will not be able to attend either on Zoom or in person. So either Chris will have to run the meeting and the other people will have to be here. Everybody will have to be here for us to have a quorum. So we need to think about that. Chris is not here. We can't ask him. So we'll have to check with him. So the second week in December, we could have that. That would be 2 meetings back to back. Our first meeting in January happens to be on the 1st of January. Nobody's going to want to meet then. So what do we want to do about that? The second week in January? I guess maybe we should do a doodle poll or something. Should we do a poll?
Doodle poll,
Or, you know,
second week in January, a monkey poll.
the people have any feelings right now? Have you thought about it? How do we want to arrange December and January? Because they're problematic because of the holidays.
I'm pretty
So-
flexible. I can do any date, so.
Okay,
So if we were to do the 11th, is that what we?
so we could do December 11th. Is that December?
Yes,
Wednesday's the 4th. So we have a meeting on the 4th. We'll have a meeting on the December 4th. Next week, we also want to talk about Jolena Court, and Jolena Court will probably be also on the 4th of December. Talking about the density bonus program. So we could meet on the 11th or anytime during that week, the 10th, the 11th, or the 12th, if we wanted to get a second meeting in December. The third week is out unless you all can do the meeting and you will have a quorum without me. The fourth week is the Christmas week. We probably don't want to meet that week. The next week is the January 1st week. We don't want to meet that week, but we could meet the week after that. So the second week in January, we could meet on the 8th. Anybody have a problem with that?
January 1 to January 8th. And we'll codify this on our next meeting and on the 20th.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
8.
just
'cause we gotta
planting
talk
a
to
seed
Chris.
here. Water it, make it sprout.
Okay,
January 1, 2, what did we say, 8th? 8th,
January 8th,
Okay.
yeah, and then the second week in December, the 11th.
18th and 8th, so 8th, 11th, December 11th, okay. So that's back-to-back weeks, I mean, that's,
It's gonna be back-to-back weeks.
that's
People
hard.
may not want to do back-to-back weeks,
Yeah.
but we'll talk about it
Talk
again
about it.
once you've thought about it. So November 20th, we're going to talk about the Jolena Court District, and we'll finish up on the flood hazard overlay district. We hope to get something by then that we can send to the select board. Wanted to mention that there's this BioFinder workshop in January that somebody else besides me should go to from the Planning Commission. This is the mapping system that is going to be absolutely essential for us when we come to talk about the Ag Res District. We're going to need to know how to use these maps that layer on the different features. So you could think about that. It's going to be January 9th. It's being put on, you know, through the Conservation Commission. Jen Hilke is going to put that on. So hopefully somebody will come to that on the 9th. It's just an hour over Zoom. And then the other thing is that we need to get started on the preparation for the town plan update, which has to take place during 2025 so that we can approve it in town meeting, hopefully 2026. And I am planning, if nobody has any objections, to send out a letter to all the committees who have action items listed in the current town plan. We did this in 2021. We sent out a letter to all the different committees saying, what action items have you completed? What are you having trouble with? What are you working on? What other ones do you think are needed? So I have a letter ready to go out to them. I'd like them to report on what they're doing with their action items. So, anybody have any concerns about that? We have a file that we made. Revi and I kept a file of the 2021 reports from the different committees. And we were supposed to report out what was said, but we never really got around to it. So amazingly enough, a lot of action items have been completed in the town plan. We were totally impressed that stuff had been done. So anyway, and there are lots of, for this coming reiteration of the town plan that we're working on for 2026. Believe it or not, there are a lot of new statutory requirements for the municipal plan. So those will have to be placed into the plan. So that's the plan for getting ready to do this work that we have to do next year. We do not want to let this plan fall out of approval. because a lot of bad things happen. You don't get stuff. And you don't want that to be the case. So we really need to work next year to be sure that, and the general plan is for all the different groups, like the housing committee is going to work on the housing section, and the natural resources people and the conservation commission, they're going to work a little bit on the natural resources section. Economic development, we don't have an economic development committee anymore, so we're going to have to figure out who's going to do that work. A lot of things, tasks, action items are assigned to the select board. So somebody's going to have to report in from their group what they're doing, and we're going to have to, figure out what they need to do. So it's going to have to be a collaborative effort, and we may have some public meetings about it to see. That was a relatively new plan that was passed in 2018, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of changes. But there will be some from Act 181, believe it or not. So our favorite. All right, anybody else have anything they want to say, or thank you all for coming? Somebody would like to make a motion to adjourn, if nobody has anything else to offer?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, great. Anybody want to second that motion to adjourn?
Yeah, let's stay.
Allison raised her hand.
Allison is seconding the motion to adjourn. She's raising her hand, I see. All right. So that motion has been made and seconded. If no one has any objection to adjourning, the meeting stands adjourned. I don't see any hands or further comments. So the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all on the 20th. And yeah, thanks.